Well, of course, development is hinged on availability of infrastructure, and the country is still having about 6 trillion naira infrastructural gap. We've had a lot of policies that are supposed to help bridge this gap. We know Dangote is involved in one of them. But, I mean, maybe we should start from there. We have in the studio joining us here, Mr. Adetilewa Adebajo, the Chief Executive Officer of CFG Advisory. Thank you so much, Mr. Adebajo, for your time. So we're talking about infrastructural deficit right there. And we've seen a collaboration between private and public sector. But we still have this large gap. Just before we go into our main conversation, do you see a way of accelerating, this development and reducing this gap? 6 trillion naira, it's a lot.
Well, in retrospect, it's not really a lot. What is most important in Nigeria today is the business environment and the investment climate. If the business environment and investment climate is not conducive, and you do not have the right incentives, then you're going to have a major problem. Let's take the two major projects in Nigeria today. The Dangote Refinery, $18 billion, almost completed, and they're going to start testing, and we're looking for products. Did you say
almost completed?
Well, yeah, almost completed in the sense that we're still waiting for the products. So
now I think they have about 6 million barrels.
Yeah, the crude is there, so we're expecting products. So now the point is that this investment is $18 billion. The next investment that's that size in Nigeria today is the LNG Train 7. Train 7 is $7 billion. So the Dangote investment is twice the size of the NLNG project, which is being carried out by major IOCs. So what is happening now is that NLNG has said that they're not going to go ahead with Train 8 because they don't have gas, the business environment is not right. And meanwhile, LNG Train 7 is just 30% completed. Now we're expecting the Dangote Refinery to come on stream to reduce dependence on imported products. Because this is very important, because productivity is very low. Because this refinery coming on stream is going to be a game changer for Nigeria. But if the investment climate is not adequate, because the question now is that Dangote has used his balance sheet to finance $18 billion. Significant amount of that has been paid down. Maybe he has outstanding of about $4 to $5 billion left because all his funds are there. The question is, what is Dangote's next project? To be able to put that money back into the system, because he has capacity for that kind of financing. Now, LNG Train 7 is also saying they're not going to Train 8. So I think what is important now is that once you can fix the business climate, ease of doing business, the investment climate, then it's FDIs into Nigeria last year was less than $200 million. That's a major issue. So we need to find a way to restructure this business so that the likes of the IOCs and the likes of the Dangote can continue to make those levels of investment in Nigeria today. So I think ease of doing business, investment climate, and it's really what we really need to focus on in this country today. If you do that, then the investments to fund the infrastructure can come in.
Okay, so I hear you about the investment climate, but before we go there, I tell you, the question on a lot of Nigerians' lips is, okay, now they've received 6 million barrels of crude. Do we have a date of operation?
That is not the issue.
It is the issue for many Nigerians.
No, it cannot be, because this is a technical project. It's just coming on stream for the first time. It's done now. Those cargoes of crude is what they're going to use to test and run the first batch of production to distill. So it's a gradual process. So we need to manage our expectations. But what is important is that this project is going to begin to deliver products into the market in the near future. Probably within the next 3 months, we should be able to see something. But you can't quote me, I'm not an expert. So,
yeah,
but
you're not Dangote.
Exactly. So I'm not even an expert in the refining area. But what we're saying is that, by the time you're already starting to refine some cargoes, they're going through their test runs. So obviously we begin to see something. So that's really not the issue. So, but the question is, there's a lot of challenges in Nigeria's business environment that we need to resolve.
We'll go back to Dangote, but you talked about investment climate.
Yes.
And you also talked about FDI.
Yes.
Now, especially in the issue of FDI, when we talk about foreign direct investment, a lot of people say we have a lot of potentials in the domestic investment climate. Why can't we explore that first? Why do we keep looking outside? We look at our NGX today doing so well. It's mostly domestic investors that are driving it. Why are we so hungry for FDI when we have not explored domestic?
First of all, let's leave the NGX out of the equation. NGX is a financial market. Let's talk about real issues. What talks about making investments that will increase Nigeria's GDP and will make growth. Okay? So now the government is financing, has a target of 17 trillion in revenue this year. Government has a deficit of 10 trillion this year, and government is using 95% of its revenues to service debt. By next year, the debt service repayment level will hit 11 trillion naira, which will be more than both recurrent and current expenditure. So what that means is that government does not have any money or any room to make any investments. So anything that is going to happen in this country today has to be driven by the private sector and foreign direct investments, and also local direct investments, as you've talked about. So what is important is that how many people are investing in Nigeria today. The two companies, multinationals, are leaving Nigeria because they're saying that the manufacturing capacity is not there. So they rather import instead of manufacture here. But they built manufacturing plants in Nigeria. But it's cheaper for them to import. So what about the companies like that are importing that are producing in Nigeria today? What incentives are you giving them to be able to ensure that productivity is high and to be able to help you grow the economy? Because if you are going to meet your 17 trillion revenue target, you need to be able to create a conducive environment for businesses to thrive. Because it is when businesses thrive that you can tax them and collect revenues. So it is very important for us to understand that. Because if you do not encourage your local businesses that are involved in Nigeria, then you're going to have challenges, especially with revenue generation.
What incentives do you think can be used to encourage them?
The incentives that are there, the incentives are not an issue. NLNG, for instance, is investing 7 billion and has like a 10-year tax holiday. There are many incentives on the books of Nigeria. So go and take advantage of them. Nigeria has one of the best investment laws on their books.
And yet our climate is not the best.
It's just the climate, because you cannot thrive under inflationary environments. So what government needs to do is to work on inflation to be able to bring inflation down. So, and these are the things that we need to see and how we're going to move things forward. And those are the things that I've looked at in the outlook that I've prepared for 2024.
Yeah, maybe you should share the outlook for us, with us, the macroeconomic outlook.
Well, before we share the macroeconomic outlook, I think it's also important to talk about this issue of productivity in the Nigerian economy, because the outlook for the budget is there. And the summary of what we're saying in our outlook is very simple. That, Nigeria has a market of 200 million consumers that have a capacity of $300 billion in terms of consumer capacity. So the potential is there, but the problem is, like I've said before, the debt profile is really what is causing problems for Nigeria. And if we cannot sort out the fiscal side of things and the monetary side of things, then we're having challenges. There's also need for us to review our investment and trade policies, including our industrial policies. They've not been updated in years. We need to improve all that to align monetary policy with fiscal policy, trade policy, industrial policy, and also,
But is it a matter of policy or implementing the policies and the laws that we already have? I mean, you just said some minutes ago that Nigeria has one of the best investment laws on paper, but that has not affected our climate, our investment climate. So is it about the policies, or is it about implementing the policies?
Well, implementation is key, and that's what we've stated here. So the policies they've put out in terms of the reform is very good. The budget they've put out is ambitious. But now it's now a question of the commitment and the sincerity to implement those policies. That's really what is important now.
Okay. And then you talked about the macroeconomic outlook for 2024. Want to share that?
Yes, this is what I've been talking about in terms of what we've looked at in terms of how we're going to...
Is there anything that could be done to accelerate? I mean, we've seen President Tinubu, bring up some reforms.
Like I've said before, it's implementation. We know what those reform policies are. We know where we are. We have a debt problem. And I think what we are saying is that businesses need to be able to manage themselves, to be able to hedge while they're looking to tame inflation. Nigeria right now is in stagflation. And there are policies that the government have put in place to try to take the government on the path of growth, from stagflation, out of stagflation, to a path of growth. So those policies, I think we've seen, they've articulated them, and they've come up with a budget. So now the monetary policy side needs to be implemented. The fiscal policy, there's a lot for fiscal reform, because the fiscal side is what poses the greatest risk in terms of government expenditure and the debt profile of Nigeria.
And of course, when we talk about taming inflation, with the CBN now adopting the inflation target stance, I mean, it takes a lot. But let's go back to Dangote. We did see, of course, I think they released a statement about the EFCC visit to their company, and I saw a post on X saying that the visit to Dangote company, I guess, based on the strength of Dangote and the niche it fills in the Nigerian economy, that's if anything happens to Dangote, we would feel it. So what have you heard about this? I know there's investigation. Their statement, as Dangote has said, that the documents required by EFCC, they have given to them, but perhaps you could enlighten us more on this issue.
Well, I think, first of all, you see, this is some of the things about the investment climate and the perception of what's going on. For my own understanding, I think 52 companies are under investigation for foreign exchange. They said they want them to submit information over the last 10 years. So if 52 companies are under investigation, my question is, why is the EFCC going to individual companies to ask for this information when the repository for the information is with the Central Bank of Nigeria or the banks themselves through the central bank? So between the banks and the central bank, you should be able to get that information independent of these 52 companies. Now, is it that the EFCC does not trust the information they're getting from the central bank? Because the central bank is also engaging on some sort of forensic audit on its foreign exchange transactions over the last 5 years. So where is the duplication, and what is driving all this? This is what I am telling you that causes investor confidence. So the optics from an international perspective doesn't look very good. Because so then you now proceed to raid a company because you have asked them for information, and the question is that, do you even have a search warrant? Has the company done anything wrong? So you have 52 companies who are probably the top companies in Nigeria that generate the most revenues for you, that are the most transparent companies, that are so-called companies you had listed on the exchange, that have corporate governance, that have compliance, that pay taxes. These are your goose that lays the golden egg. You should not be treating them like this, because the signals you're sending to the international investors are wrong. And let me also state that nobody is also above the law. And the EFCC does have a right to its investigation, but it must follow a process that it's seen internationally. The US Department of Justice carried out an investigation on Goldman Sachs regarding to a transaction in Malaysia. It was a bond issue of about $600 billion. Eventually, they fined Goldman $2.6 billion. But the way they went through it did not disrupt Goldman's operations. They did not disrupt it. They did not give the company a bad name. But so we need to be very careful, because government is trying to raise 17 trillion in revenues this year. It is the likes of these companies that are there. And if you want to zero down to Dangote, if Dangote industry sneezes, the Nigerian economy will catch a cold.
All right, Mr. Adetile, thank you so much for your time with us this afternoon. We certainly look forward to more things coming from Dangote, especially the refinery. We're eager about that. Thank you for your time. So let's take a break now. When we come back, other conversations. And the market, the NGX, is above 82,000 points at intraday. I can't wait to talk about that. Join us again.